Okay, good. Easy.
Welcome to the Music Reel. I'm your host, Nicola Burton. Today, I am speaking with award-winning Australian music journalist and author, Stuart Coupe. Stuart, welcome to the Music Reel.
How are you? Happy to be here.
Oh, it's good to talk to you. It's really good to talk to you. I've just looked at your list of books. Now, those of you who don't know, Stuart is a prolific author, and I want to read some of the books that you've done. So it's The Promoters, and then it's Gudinski, and then it's Roadies. And just recently you've released a book about Paul Kelly. So number one, congratulations. And that's by no means not all of the books that you've done. So I guess I'm curious to know from you, what is it about this industry that compels you to share these kind of stories with us, Stuart?
Look, I have been music obsessed since I was about 5 or 6 or 7. I think I bought my first 45 when I was around 12 years of age. And when I was about 17, I decided that I wanted to try writing about music. And I just sort of learnt, honed my skills, went to university in Adelaide. I come from Tasmania, and, became editor of the university newspaper. Then started a magazine called Roadrunner with a friend of mine. And then I got offered a job at Ram magazine in Sydney. We're still back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. We're back in 1978. And then I moved to Sydney. And at some point I worked out I've had about 6 to 8 million words about music and other things. I mean, I was the crime fiction book reviewer for the Sydney Morning Herald for 18 years. And I have a lifetime achievement for my contributions to Australian crime fiction, but I just enjoy all facets of it. I mean, as well as doing the books, I've worked as a tour promoter. I still do 2 radio shows a week, one of which is national. I do a lot of independent artist publicity. What else do I do? I do other stuff, but no, look, I'm one of the luckiest people on the planet because I scream and moan at times, and then I sort of gently slap myself around and say, wake up to yourself. You actually wake up every morning and spend your waking hours doing something that you love. You talk to creative people, you listen to music, you read books. Occasionally you get paid for doing all of the above. And I was a band manager. I managed the Hoodoo Gurus and obviously Paul Kelly for many years. So no, I just, that's a long-winded answer to your question, and I've actually forgotten the specific question, but look, I enjoy it. And occasionally I suspect that I might have become, reasonably adept at doing some of it as well. So that's what I do.
You said the most important thing. You are lucky, and you get to wake up in the morning and do what you love. And I think that's the key here. Is not a lot of people don't get to do that. And clearly you love this industry. So I guess my next question is, why Paul Kelly as your latest book? What was it about that story that you needed to tell?
Look, my books have become increasingly about preserving the stories related to Australian culture and Australian popular culture. Because people do die, and in the course of a few books, people have passed away. Sometimes before I've had the opportunity to speak with them, other times afterwards. So it's really about the Paul Kelly book has there are no secondary sources in this book. I did over 100 interviews, all new interviews with all of these people, but I was drawn to Paul because he was the very first interview I ever did back in June or July 1977. I attempted to interview Paul in Adelaide. He had left Adelaide and was living in Melbourne at the time, but he was back with his then band, the High Rise Bombers. And then we became reasonable friends, like not close, but the way that musicians must tend to, have relationships. And I wrote very favourably about his first 2 albums. And then when he came to Sydney after that now much mythologised legendary 13 hours on the bus from St Kilda to King's Cross, he called me up, and I did have an office in King's Cross, and he said, could he come over and have a chat and have a beer? So we went to the local pub, had a bit of a yarn, and at the end of that yarn, I was Paul's manager, which I did for the rest of the 1980s. So I was his manager during post Gossip, which was his breakthrough record, was Before Too Long, and Darling It Hurts, and Under the Sun, and So Much Water, So Close to Home. And then we parted company as friends. We just stopped working together, and really the genesis for the book was partly in that, but I'd finished doing my book on Roadies, and I was thinking about what I would do next. And Paul, of course, has written his own book, a 600-page memoir, which is fantastic. It's insightful. It's very well written, and has lots of stuff in it, but also doesn't have lots of stuff in it. And so, I'd read it, and I went, what, this is really good, but there's another book that can be written about Paul that puts in all the stuff that he doesn't talk about. Particularly did the one thing that you can't with a first-person memoir. I wanted to give voice to everybody else, because I never believe that, these people emerge in a vacuum. And so, I set about talking to all the people that had fed into Paul's creative life, songwriting, playing, touring, all of that sort of stuff. And also, I wanted to tell a lot of the stuff that Paul very consciously doesn't talk about. He's had his first 2 records removed from circulation. I think in 600 pages, he devoted maybe 4 to the period 1976 to 1984. So, it was very, there's all sorts of personal reasons for that. He was existing in a drug-fueled Melbourne underground rock and roll scene in that era. And, as someone said to me in my book, I said, why does he dislike those records so much? And this person said they remind him of a time and place that he would prefer to forget. So I wanted to explore that too. And, after a year or so of politely badgering, he, via his manager, gave his blessing to me doing the book. I wasn't going to write it if he was really opposed to it. I didn't see the point, but I just wanted him not to get in the way. I just wanted him not to be a nuisance. And he wasn't a nuisance, and he agreed to be interviewed towards the end of the project, and he was. And he was extremely generous. We hadn't seen each other for like 22 years, literally. Just that's life. And, as I said, we never fell out. We just live in different cities. When I go to see gigs, I don't go backstage and wave and say, hey, look at me, I'm here. I just go and see a show and disappear. So when we met up again, I was well advanced on this book. And he knew all the people I'd been talking to. He knew I was going back to those sort of grimy, seedy days and the early period. But we worked out when we did see each other that, it was 22 years since we'd seen each other or exchanged a word. So it was kind of fun for both of us. And so we did a couple of interviews, and he kept volunteering more time. And I have to say this book is not authorized, but and I said, look, if you're getting bored, we can stop. It's okay. And he said, no, it's fun hanging out and, trying to patch together, everything that happened in those years. So then when I pretty much finished, I offered him the opportunity to read it. Because I figure if you're writing a book about a living subject, particularly someone who commands such respect as Paul does, you kind of want to know whether you've got an ambivalent subject, a pro-positive subject, or at worst, I wouldn't be in such a good mood now if I had an antagonistic subject. And the book goes into a lot of stuff that I wasn't sure how he would deal with, but that was the nature of how I work. You have to put friendships on the line to do the right job. And when I offered it to him, he sent me a nice note saying that he appreciated the offer. He said, I don't expect to like it all, because if I do, you haven't done your job, which is a good basis to start with. Yeah. And then I sent it to him, and I was nervous. He's got a vigorous intellect. And, about 4 days went by, and I'm going, what does he think? What does he think? The short version of this is that he said, you've done a really, really great job. He said, I find the first about 180 pages. He said, I find it really confronting to read. That part is not easy for me to read. But then, so he volunteered more time, corrections. To his credit, he didn't ask me to change one thing in what I'd written, and I knew we were doing well when he sent me a bunch of fairly personal family photos which I'd never seen before, and including one of him with all of his or most of his brothers and sisters, and a little note saying, please make sure you credit Whiskey the dog. And by the way, it's Whiskey without an E. So Whiskey the dog without an E is credited in the family photo in the book. So, that's how, I mean, he's a national icon. He's part of our fabric. He hasn't always been successful. He's worked very hard. He's worked very diligently, very determinedly, very single-mindedly to be the Paul Kelly that we now kind of take for granted. So, and as I said earlier, I wanted to do that history because, in all the years that I was managing Paul, no one ever called up and said, hey, can I talk to the drummer? Can I talk to the bass player? Those conversations didn't happen. It was like, can we talk to Paul? And if I went, Paul's busy, they would go, when is Paul unbusy? They didn't say, can I talk to Steve Conley, one of the finest rock guitarists of the last 30 or 40 years. No, they wanted to talk to Paul. So all of these people, in most cases, they're talking for the first time because just no one's ever bothered to ask them.
But how good is that? Because you're actually letting everyone have a voice. I mean, that's what history is all about. And I think that's what interests me about talking to you today is that moving forward, we really need to look back and dig really deep into the mechanism of how our industry got to this point in order to find possible solutions for moving forward. I mean, with these lockdowns, with your experience of our industry, what do you think about the damage that's being caused to our industry?
Look, I have mixed feelings about it. Obviously, I'm I don't like what's going on and why it's happening. I kind of like the pace of life. And there are things that despite the reason that it is happening, I think people are nicer. It's calmer. The world is less noisy. There are things that it has caused, whilst obviously, massive amount of heartbreak and pain and death and stuff like that. So, when I say that, I say it with the caveat that, of course, it's the worst cause for the world that we live in. And I think my greatest sympathies in the music and entertainment industry are with the people I wrote my last book about, the road crew and the technical crew, because they are really, out on their own. And my book Roadies was prompted by the fact that Australian roadies and technical crew have about 6 times the national suicide rate in this country. It was a phenomenal death toll, and outside of that, phenomenal mental health issues. And my book was really telling the stories was a way to get people to look at their world and the mental health issues and the suicide rate. So it's incredibly tough times for them, and it won't change anytime soon. I don't think we will have international touring in this country probably till 2022. Look, maybe a little bit towards the end of next year, but none of us know how this is all going to progress. So that's my principal concern. Look, for musicians, it's also kind of weird. I mean, I've observed 2 approaches. One is head in the sand. Everything's terrible. Everything's, I can't do anything. I spent a lot of time in New York City, and I remember, people, for a year after 9/11, my marriage broke down because of 9/11. My business went broke because of 9/11. I'm going, dude, maybe your marriage was pretty screwed before 9/11, and maybe your business was going to go broke anyhow. Don't blame it. And people at work all the time. Look, it's hard. Of course, it's hard, but so many people are doing using it as a time to work really hard, you know, and I'm busier as an independent publicist than I have ever been. Because I'm saying to all of the people I work with, I said, this is a unique time. You know, it's horrible what has caused this to be a unique time. But I said, you may never actually, sadly, because of coronavirus, you as an independent Australian musician may never actually get it this good. You know, because there is more opportunity. Everyone is predisposed. I do 2 radio shows, you know, one of them syndicated nationally. We are predisposed to playing more Australian independent music. We have more time on our radio shows to play independent Australian music because we're not being harassed by major labels with big releases. We want to support you. We want to help you. And people say, oh, I can't play live. And I go, nobody can play live. No one is singling you out for not being able to play live. Zero. No one plays live. So why don't you use this time to make your footprint so much more significant in the marketplace, so that when you and everybody else can go out and play live, you're not playing catch up. You know, use this time to build your profile, build your awareness, build your knowledge of how the music industry works. Spend some time looking at other people's touring patterns and do all that sort of stuff, because when everything returns to what we will call something approaching normal in the future, at some point in 6 months, in 2 years, in 4 years, it may never come back to the way it was. The floodgates will open. There will be a bun fight. So don't just sit there going, oh, woe is me. You know, I got a head cold today. I could be in bed, but I'm enjoying chatting to you. You know, like, stop using the excuses. So I think, you know, Paul Kelly, going back to Paul, you know, Paul every day on Instagram and on Facebook, he performed. You know, he read poems, he sang songs, he put them out there. And then what did he do? He put the best together and he released his COVID album. Yeah. You know, which was building his profile, giving his audience an insight into what he was listening to and what he was reading during this lockdown period. Smart move, smart boy. You know, so I, you know, yes, if my livelihood depended on live touring, you know, it's tough. Of course it's tough. You know, you suddenly, you know, you're effectively unemployed. But these people that go out and play live all the time, they go out and play live because they have a bunch of original songs. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing we can do about it. We cannot make the live scene return. So why not make sure that by the time you go out to play again, you've got 3 times as many live songs, that you've released songs. I mean, the people I'm doing publicity with, you know, we're bringing out songs every couple of weeks. I just bombard people with music. Yeah. And let's just get it out. People want Australian independent music. Let's get it out to them. And so when you can join everybody else on the planet, you know, they're not picking on Australians, they're not picking on people in Melbourne particularly, then you are in as good, if not better, position than anyone else. And certainly try and think of yourself as being in a better position than you were before COVID, with a better repertoire, with a better array of songs, with a better profile in the media. You know, use that time. Start sending music to magazines and radio stations overseas. I mean, there's a million things a creative artist can be doing.
Exactly. It's an opportunity, isn't it? And if we're really smart, we can leverage this time, because fingers crossed, we don't ever have to deal with this time again in our lifetimes. So like you're saying, it's a time to leverage this space that we've got to try and build our business in a different format. We can't play live, so we're going to have to find another way. That's just how it is.
Absolutely. I honestly, I mean, I love working and I work very hard, but I don't think, and the same goes for my partner, I don't think we have ever been busier than, you know, and of course I go back to that word lucky. Yes, we're fortunate. Yes, we, you know, work in different areas, but you know, so yes, it is lucky. But I'm also working with, I mean, I have 28 active publicity clients at the moment, which is far too many, but they're all people who aren't putting their head down under the pillow. They're all people who go, hey, you know, we can join the queues of people that are going to wait till coronavirus, which, you know, who knows, it may be never. We may have to learn to live with this, like we live with the flu and other things. You know, there was absolutely no assurance that they're going to come up with a vaccination and all of that sort of stuff. I'm no expert, but I'm not seeing front pages saying go to your local doctor and get an injection, get a needle, and you won't get coronavirus. I haven't seen that headline yet. So we just have to live with it and adapt and do whatever we can until it changes.
That's a good possible roadmap to recovery, Stuart. Thank you for that. And anyone who wants to buy your book, how can they find it, the Paul Kelly book?
They can go to, hopefully every bookshop that's open. But even in Melbourne, I have heard, it's still possible to order via bookshops and come and collect with a non-contact thing. People find me on social media and they can buy it direct from me. I think there's something like 15,000 books out there in bookstores, but I know I've sold 350 in the last week just by people, because I personalize them and I mail them direct to your door, so you don't need to see another human being, but you can read a Paul Kelly book. And of course, I always encourage people to go to bricks and mortar bookshops and buy. But, there are, really good mail order businesses like Booktopia, if I'm allowed to plug a business that I have no involvement with, except that I like them and I spend far too much money with them as it is. So there are ways to circumvent the going out into the world to get this book.
Beautiful. Well, I'll make sure I put all the links in this post. So everyone, I would encourage you, if you haven't read Stuart's books, make sure you dive in, because this will help you to pivot and innovate how you understand the past. Is going to help you prepare for whatever the post-COVID future is that is facing us. And we have no idea, right? We have no idea. We're all making it up as we go along. So, yeah.
We don't have a choice. And that's as I keep saying to people, no one is picking on you. COVID didn't look you up online and go, Bill or Sue. It's you're in our sights. It is everybody, and so that's just it's a world that we have to deal with, and some people are a little luckier than others depending on what their life skills are and what work they do, and sometimes I'm more fearful, for the mental health side of things, and I think that will be something that will make itself sadly more obvious a little bit further down the line, and there are a lot of things that are not good, the domestic violence, figures going up, and the, alcohol and drug consumption figures that I'm seeing, and, there's a hell of a lot of stuff to be worked on, and, yeah.
Yeah, but look, Stuart, it was so great to hear your story, to hear your take on our industry and our history. I really appreciate you adding your voice to this conversation. I wish you well in the times that are coming forward. So thank you for talking to me today, Stuart. Stuart Coupe, everyone. Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, my pleasure. Thank you.